Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the ranking of every movie that I watched in 2020. Before I start, I should shout out Tiermaker for allowing me the ability to showcase my list. And once I'm done my list, I will provide a link to it in the description in the final video. Without further ado, let's get into the list. Beginning and marking the halfway point of my countdown is a Christmas classic, Elf. Directed by Jon Favreau. Obviously, Elf is synonymous for being a celebrated Christmas classic now, even even though it's only been around for less than 20 years. And it's just a very wholesome movie. And it's not a very long movie in runtime, but you would notice with how much is present in the scenes. Furthermore, Will Ferrell's performance, he's so likable in this performance and comedic as well. And as well, not to mention, he has a dramatic side to his character where he's trying to seek his purpose. And he's always thought of himself as an elf, but in reality, he's a human, and he's trying to find out where he came from. And seeing his relationship develop with his father, played by James Caan, and it's really interesting actually looking at the history behind this movie as presented in a Netflix documentary, the Christmas movies that made us, and everything that, like, the movie was almost not even, it didn't even come to be, but they persevered and they found a director to uh, present it on screen, and it's as a result the final product is almost flawless. And while it's not a perfect movie it's not flawless in terms of what actually happens. I think as far as Christmas movies go, this is a top tier Christmas movie and one of my all time favorite films.
Does someone need a hug?
Next on my list is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Now, earlier in my countdown, I unveiled Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and I unveiled how much I adore John Hughes films. And this is no different in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where you have a slacking teen who is determined to make the most out of his life. I mean, he lives to the motto "Carpe Diem," and while he explores the city of Chicago with his other two friends, and and chaos ensues. And it's such, again, another wholesome movie. You want to, even though you know it's wrong for him to be slacking off and skipping school, you're rooting for him at all of his adventures. That it's irrelevant. School's irrelevant, and how we often take take for granted our right to school, and how much effort we put into it, and how we deserve a little break here and there. And it shows in this movie where you have Ferris Bueller, the iconic driving his driving of the Ferrari in the city of Chicago, and then just going around the city trying to avoid running into his parents. And it's just one of the funniest movies I've ever seen, and you can't even skip any moment, and until even the mid-credit scene is hysterical. So overall, it's such a great classic film that holds up even though it came out in 1986.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.
Next on my list is another Will Ferrell film, going around at the same time as Elf and boosting him to stardom. Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy. I I love this film, and the fact that I can basically recount every line in this movie is a great tribute to what this movie has become, and specifically how this movie is, even though coming out 16 years, 17 years ago is still relevant in internet culture today. And honestly, it's about a news anchor who's down on his luck and is exposed to this new partner played by Christina Applegate. And while also having, being kind of stubborn in involving her in his life with being part of this group, a news group for a long time, he eventually grows to see her as not only as a love interest but as a person. And as this takes place in the 70s, that was hard to do, surprisingly hard to do for the times, at least in the media. And it's funny in that sense. They do tend to put a dramatic spin to it, but overall it is a funny film, and one that I don't want to watch. I wouldn't watch it uh, consistently, but once in a while it's always a good watch.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Next we have The Social Network, a movie based on a true story of the creation of Facebook by Harvard student Mark Zuckerberg, and directed by David Fincher. This movie tells of how Zuckerberg rose to power in the social media industry, and the way he's portrayed so smug and unlikable, even from the opening scene. And I gotta give credit to Fincher on that, and specifically Jesse Eisenberg, who looks is uncanny in the appearance to Zuckerberg. Furthermore, it's fascinating seeing what in, unfolds in Zuckerberg's rise to fame, and how he's able in his infancy, he has all these friends of his who are in charge of building up building up the brand, and obviously while also facing uh, a lawsuit from the Winklevoss twins, played both by Armie Hammer. I won't get into Armie Hammer right now, but he does a very good job, and it's tragic seeing him as he becomes more famous, and the brand goes national, while only originally being intended to be used by Harvard students to rape girls online, which and kind of sexist in how I was able to rise to national fame. While doing that, he has to let go of some of his friends and colleagues that he's going to trust with, and specifically Andrew Garfield, who, when he learns of the betrayal of Mark Zuckerberg,
Yes.
About now, you still wired in?
Security.
You issued 24 million new shares of stock.
goes AWOL on him, and that scene is one that stands out to me in this film, where Andrew Garfield's character confronts Zuckerberg on his lies and deceitfulness, and he's unable to do anything about it. It's just shocking, and I can see why this is one of the best films to come out of the last decade, because it certainly is. Next time on this coincidentally so happens to be directed by the screenwriter of The Social Network, The Trial of Chicago 7, directed by the aforementioned Aaron Sorkin, who also did Molly's Game. And this movie follows the true story of the events of the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and and the aftermath of that event, of which led to a riot and the arrest of several people, innocent people, and specifically these 7 or 6. And as what I liked about this movie is how they put us in the period. The 1960s were a very tense time in the United States, specifically in the late 60s, where you had the Vietnam War at its highest point, and people, they were willing to fight against the war and what it meant, as it was basically costing thousands of innocent American lives when they had no say, and they wanted to have a say. And whole trial is and the epitome, all the frustration that went towards the government for what the role it played in Vietnam. And specifically, you have these 7 men who are determined to fight for their right, but are held back by the administration. And the performances here are just superb. You know, the likes of Sacha Baron Cohen. You wouldn't think he was Borat in this movie. He really established himself. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, and not to mention Jeremy Strong. Just came off a Emmy Award-winning role for Succession. And how they interact with the judge, played by Frank Langella, who is this sturdy authority figure, but is sequestered by the 2 guys who aren't really taking the court proceedings seriously and are rebelling against it as a result. And it's just such it's a good allegory for how we are in society right now, and how there's so much turmoil unfolding, and riots, and how people are left helpless in these events and really not even given a voice. And sometimes it's just best to fight back against the administration that is corrupted by the whole system, and as a result, they are able to win their emancipation and feel satisfied as a result. And that it is one of the best films that came out in 2020 that I watched this year. Next is a foreign film, one of which I've never had the opportunity to see, but my parents have been a die-hard fan of this movie for a long time, with the full name being Nuova Cinema Paradiso, an Italian film that came out in 1989. And it's just was one of the most wholesome and beautiful films I've ever seen in my life. The story being about an old man who is in charge of a cinema in a small Italian town, and who befriends a young kid, and who eventually grows to appreciate the kind of cinema that is portrayed that is shown at the cinema of this movie theater, and eventually grows to see him as a role model, almost a fatherly figure, as he's kind of a troubled kid at home. And while also, as this old man is in charge of distributing the film that is shown at the movie theater, this young kid yearns to be like this old man one day. And until tragically, Cinema Paradiso burns to the ground in a tragic fire. And you see the build-up throughout the movie, and you're really rooting for the little kid. And when that happens, it's just heartbreaking. And I can't even put it into words how sad I was when I saw that. And you see him throughout the movie trying to regain that love, and showing that the old man who almost perished in the fire, and trying to help him out. And then, not even to mention, the beginning of the film, we see an elderly man in his bed, not only to know later on that it's that same kid who eventually came to be a success after having grown up on the streets and with little money, and he's grown to this big success. And it's really satisfying to see that him do that. And it's just the score from Ennio Morricone, who, rest in peace, is one of the best ever, and it's just such a great film that holds up to the test of time, and can never really be. There's really little to no flaws in this film, except for what I've heard the director's cut is kind of brought in something that didn't need to be there. But overall, it's such a stellar film. Bellissimo. Next, we're going to go in a completely different direction with We're the Millers, a movie that it's hard to describe the premise of this movie, but basically 4 strangers are forced to live as a family in order to help out Jason Sudeikis' attempt to smuggle drugs into the United States from Mexico. And while these four strangers are bonded in strange coincidences, they eventually grow to form a family-like mentality. And then while they also have their trials and tribulations here and there, and obviously trying to, they're on the run from the Mexican drug cartel, who they illegally stole their drugs from, and then legally they should be also on the run. But no, they're portrayed as a bunch of stowaways, a bunch of people you wouldn't think are like the most family worthy of people, but eventually they grow to being one. And specifically, what I like is the whole chemistry. Chemistry between all the actors is fantastic in this movie. And it's honestly, and like again, I've said this before, so I've probably become a broken record at this point. But this movie produced the most laughs for me. It is so it's so clever in some of its jokes that I can't help but laugh. And as a result, it's just such a I didn't think I was gonna like it too much, but I really was surprised, and it was a very surprisingly funny film. Next is Jojo Rabbit, a movie directed by Taika Waititi, and is based off a short story of a little kid who lives in Nazi Germany and who befriends a fictionalized version of Adolf Hitler. And when you think of that premise, you're kind of turned off by the whole notion that this is such a serious event in human history that how can you satirize it? But no, Waititi, he does that to a perfect extent. And specifically, what I liked is how not only do you have a lot of comedic moments this movie, there are a lot of dramatic moments. And specifically, what hits to home is when we find out that the little kid, his mom, played by Scarlett Johansson, was hanged, and we don't, and it's so subtle in that point. They don't, and they go to show don't tell. Waititi has trust the audience knows what happened without having to tell us, and I really respect him for that. And with such a depressing and as a premise that hits close to home, not even though it's been over 80 years, it's just such a perfectly crafted film, and while also dealing on a child's desire to find acceptance and seek their purpose in the world, and trying to resist conforming, which is really extremely hard to do, especially living in Nazi Germany, when basically if you did not conform, you were going to be eliminated. So to put a comedic spin on that, I never expected it to work, but he does it eloquently, and I give him full respect, and it was fully deserved of Best Picture nomination. Next, another Best Picture nomination from the year of 2020, Marriage Story. Now, gradually, movies from Netflix are now being considered for Best Picture, and it's only really happened over the past couple of years that's been the case. And this movie was another example of that. Marriage Story, directed by Noah Baumbach, a highly acclaimed director at that, and an almost allegorical spin on his own relationship with Jennifer Jason Leigh, and the divorce that unfolded. And you see these two characters played by Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson, and you feel like they're destined to be with each other. I mean, like one's a director and one's an actress. That would seem like the perfect fit, but you soon realize there's more to this relationship, and there's a dark side to it, and you see it unfold how they become embittered with each other and can barely tolerate each other, ultimately resulting in their eventual divorce. And then when we see how the divorce unfolds, it's everything that their marriage wasn't. Their marriage seemed like it was the perfect relationship, and in the divorce, there's nothing but yelling and dissent towards each other, and it's tragic to see that unfold. And the performances are spectacular. I mean, from Driver, obviously, aforementioned, to Laura Dern, to Alan Alda, and you think that this would be going in. You think that this would be a love story, but it is, as it says in the trailer, it is a story about love and how sometimes love does not turn out how people envision it to, and it's tragic in that sense, but it's extremely realistic in that it is always not meant to be. And last but not least for today, my favorite film that came out in 2020, and the only movie that I was grateful of officially seeing it in a movie theater in 2020, Tenet, directed by Christopher Nolan. This is his first film since Dunkirk, and it's hard to explain the plot of this movie, and I would be hard pressed to even say this movie has a coherent plot. It is obviously by no means a perfect movie. With the premise being so unfathomable, and not to mention the dialogue is also unintelligible at times with the loud score, although the score is very good. This story follows the protagonist, literally his name, played by John David Washington, who is a soldier and is tasked with he's tasked with participating in this program called Tenet, with the premise being that they are tasked with saving the world from nuclear annihilation. And it seems like there's very big stakes at this for it to fail. And specifically, what they're granted the ability to travel back in time to avoid this from happening. And while at the same time they're trying to stop the evil billionaire, played by Kenneth Branagh, from not only abusing his wife, but also from gaining access to nuclear football, which will cause the world to end. And we know, and with that being said, with us knowing that the world, how big the stakes are, we're obviously rooting for the protagonist and what we come to know as Neil, to help and save the world. And he eventually befriends this Russian billionaire, and only to be betrayed by him and left near dead. And he's able to travel back in time. And I think and I don't really want to get into spoilers here, but the revelation that comes when he is fighting with someone in the airport caught me off guard, and really it goes to show how our minds can play tricks on us. And in that case, I like what Christopher Nolan did in this movie. And specifically, I think there are themes of family in this movie, specifically with Elizabeth Debicki's character, whom it is possible that who's trying to gain access to her son, and she's being denied that opportunity through the actions of her ex-husband, played by Kenneth Branagh. And it's so tragic because we want to see her gain access to her son, and we eventually see that, and it's satisfying, and then to see her finally gain access to seeing her son after being denied the opportunity. So, but overall, it is a very prophetic film for 2020, in that it would have been nice to go back in time, to avoid before everything that happened in COVID. But overall, it is a very underrated film. I know it's a very divisive film, but I think it's very well done. Like the whole stunts, all that plane stunt with the real Boeing jet was spectacular to see. And I think that I hope this will be a movie that ages well, like Inception. And it was a very good film that it was unfortunate to have come out in a time like this. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's list of movies set 50 to 41. Join me next time as I unveil movies 40 to 31. Arrivederci.